Hi, Scott McArthur here. I'm joined today by the wonderful Mark Ashton. Mark, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, and looking forward to it.
And the reason I wanted to have you on my channel was that I know that you work with your people, well, all types of people, as part of your remit, Mark. And I wanted to talk to somebody who was doing that during the pandemic, because I know a lot of people are talking about things like wellness and, how are we coping with being, stuck at home or working. I mean, I've got kids through the door here. They can make an entrance any minute, Mark, so I'm warning you now. But you seem the ideal person to talk to about these issues. So what's been your experience so far? What have you been encountering since the pandemic started, what, 9-10 months ago now?
Well, of course, it's unprecedented territory, isn't it? And it's having very, very interesting effects on people. I think what I find is, in a way, is it's making us all much more honest about ourselves, and we're all seeking more social contact online because we can't get it in person.
That's interesting, because I don't know if you saw it. There was an article in one of the Sunday newspapers in which current Prime Minister Boris Johnson said something about he believes everyone will flock back to the cities after the pandemic. I'm not sure I agree with that, because that links to your honesty statement, doesn't it? Because I think that's pretty wise, Mark. I think there is more honesty flying around, internal, our own honesty.
Yeah, so I think, look, come on, business and politics are all about appearances, and you can't make it, fake it, kind of thing. And and I think that's just human nature, and I think that aspect will carry on, whether it's online, in person. People going back into the city, people will go back into the towns and cities. However, this is a fundamental change. I don't think any of us remotely believed that something on this scale could take place, and it's still obviously running out of control. And there's been this huge sort of delayed reaction of understanding just how bad this is and how bad it could still get. So no, I don't. I think we are in for fundamental changes. I think what this has done, of course, is it's accelerated the whole digital revolution by. We see this in our area because I live in the Yorkshire Dales National Park, and already we're seeing people moving in, coming from the towns and the cities, who just they don't want to be there, and they just want to work from home in a beautiful place.
Yes. Funny, we've seen the same thing here in the Cotswolds. There's talk of significant house price increases around here. I mean, we're not in the market, but I've heard a few people saying that house prices are increasing significantly in the areas that are within reasonable commuting distance of London, in this part of the country, certainly. So what are people telling you then when you're speaking to them? What are they saying? How are they coping with things?
That varies. There are people who are either still doing very, very well, or would like you to believe
Yeah.
still doing very, very well, and everything is absolutely fine. And then going back to the honesty thing, I mean, there are people who are just kind of talking openly about where their business is at, maybe not about themselves. And then there are the folk who are just going, you know what, I just don't know what to do. I don't, this is just, I don't think I can carry on dealing with this any longer. The pressure is too great. What do I do next? I mean, everything I've worked for is gone. And I know, you and I have talked about, what you've been doing in the last 12 months, just to reinvent and get out there, and the level of resilience and commitment that you have to do that with no certainty. It's just the big thing. All of a sudden, it's complete uncertainty.
Yeah. This, talking about honesty, I mean, I've found the last 9 months hellish. I mean, And I mean, this is a story. I mean, it's not in any way unique, but I had the best book I've ever had in front of me. You know, and in March it all went away. And indeed, next week I've got my first paid speaking gig since March last year, which for someone who was doing 3 a week, you know, before it's, and I mean, in my head, it's funny because I mean, I hope the client watches this, and I'll ask her to watch it. But I said to her, I said, you know, I am nervous, and I'm not nervous. You know, you've seen me, I'm not the nervous type. You know, it's not my thing. But because it's been 12 months nearly, it's amazing how your body reacts. You know, you all your well, I think you kind of hinted at it. It's almost like armor. You know, you've almost got. I'm sounding like a Jungian psychologist here. You know, you've almost got this armor that you have on that protects you normally, and that's it reinforced by, you know, the fact that. And I was looking at my diary, Mark, right, before I came on, and I was looking at a year ago this week, and I had 2 major events this week, and at least 3 prospecting calls, and it's like Jesus. And it seems so long ago now. That's the other thing. My head is kind of when I look in the mirror, and I not only do I need a haircut, but I also see this guy that I think, can I go back to that? You know, that's I'm getting doubts now because all my work, as you know, has been now in front of this Logitech HD 1080 camera rather than in front of audiences. So it's very odd.
Yes, it just calls everything into question, doesn't it, in your own mind? And it affects your self-image.
Mm.
You begin to ruminate because you've got so much time on your hands, relatively speaking, and
Yes.
because I think you and I are the same in this respect. You know, as kind of quite extrovert people, and
Yeah.
we draw our energy from other people, and
Yeah.
if
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
and it just is not the same sat in front of a computer screen.
No.
And I've noticed this recently when I've been, before this latest lockdown, just been able to get out, go for a walk with a mate, whatever, do something together, do some work together, you know, manual work out in the garden.
Mm.
It it feels completely different, and I think that's, you know, there's going to be a huge ongoing psychological pandemic now from this.
Yeah.
There's articles about it. You know, there's a lot of research pointing in that direction, and people. I think it requires a different style of engagement and interaction,
Mm.
you know, where people need to be properly engaged. So if they're sat at home, you know, they're part of the business, but they're not part of the business, right? You know, they've got too many distractions. They're not feeling that sense of engagement with others, and they're just going to, you know, their level of I don't know whether you'd call it presenteeism, virtual presenteeism. You know, how tuned in are they to getting the job done?
That's interesting. And you know what? I have read. God, we've been very thoughtful today, aren't we?
It's
Yeah.
worrying.
Yeah. I have read a lot of people saying that they really enjoy working from home. There's part of me believes them, and there's part of me thinks they're telling total lies to themselves and to their organizations. And it's probably not A or B, it's probably both.
Yeah.
There's probably parts of it they enjoy and parts of it that they don't enjoy. But I know I what's happening with me is I've got. I mean, I get quite confused, and I've said this. You've seen me speak. Sometimes words get used so much that they almost become meaningless.
Yes.
Yeah, and the word resilience to me historically. I mean, I went on a resilience development program in 2018 because I knew I was getting into this speaking world and it was becoming very difficult in terms of not the work. The work was fantastic, but it was the sheer volume of the work. And I had to get, you know, physical help, mental help, and all the rest of it. You know, went in a fitness thing, and I got mental. I had to work on my brain as well as my body. And what I found during this lockdown is that I'm fractious. I'm quite, if some, like I did an interview with a friend of mine earlier today, actually, a chap called John, and my boys, who are only 11 and 8, were making a noise outside my studio, despite me having told them not to. Now, in the past, I would have gone, oh, boys will be boys, right? I was absolutely furious. I just told them both I was disappointed in them. I didn't shout at them. I didn't do anything silly. But 12 months ago, I would have just taken that in the chin and gone, oh, 12. But I just noticed myself, and I thought, why are you so blinking angry? I mean, does that resonate with you? Is that the sort of thing that you've experienced or your clients have experienced? There's definitely a change in me.
Yeah, it's what this is it's the primitive fight or flight system in the brain. So much is going on in the brain that is at the subconscious level, in levels of the brain that developed millions of years ago, and we've got no control over. I'm finding with clients that there are levels of what would one call it? Levels of mental health are deteriorating, and it's certainly been the case with me as well. I have become quite depressed. It's something that I've suffered from in the past,
Right.
And it's really irrational, because what you've got. And I do this with the mentoring as well. I find I'm mentoring people, telling them exactly the things that I should be taking on board myself, right? And of course, it's easy when you're looking at other people and you can see you can see how they are misjudging what their situation is, how they come across to other people.
Right. Yes.
They are. We all have a tendency to do this, don't we? We all have a tendency to pull ourselves down behind the mask, and because we can't see ourselves the way other people see us, and we tend to, we know all of our things that we've screwed up, and we put a lot of focus on those.
Yeah.
What on earth was I thinking when I said that? Where did that come from? Well, the reality is, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If somebody else done that, somebody that you've got a good relationship with, or you respect, you just let it go.
Yes, of course. Of course. We've all done that, haven't we? I mean, I know I have several times. So how then do the sort of lasting effects of this? I guess nobody really knows. I mean, I don't know if you know, but I'm not sure if I know enough to have any definitive judgment on it. But I would imagine, I'm talking personally, it will take me quite some time to, I mean, hopefully getting over this in the next 6 months. And I'm saying it's going to be at least, it could be 2 or 3 years before things get anything like where they were before. But I think I think the word that you used was very interesting, was meaning, looking for or seeking meaning. And I think that's the thing for me that I've lost. I've regained it somewhat doing this, doing videos and making, doing live broadcasts, smart, but totally out of my comfort zone, have no idea what I'm doing. But people are now saying, oh, I'm enjoying that. Oh, thanks for that. I'm going, oh, right. Okay. So I'm helping that guy. Great. Right. The only problem is you're not getting paid for it like you did before. And that for me, obviously the link to money, and that's about a hygiene factor, being able to feed your family, and it's ridiculous, and being, as we both are, directors of limited companies, it's not exactly the best position to be in at the moment either, because there's no help. So it seems to me to be the perfect storm for people to have significant mental health problems, and I include myself in that. I mean, I think the way I responded was I went off the rails for a couple of weeks. I mean, I hit the pub, and I was in the pub solidly for 2 weeks. I mean, I gave myself a good talking to, and I think I've told you this before. And I got out of the pub and I started working on video, and I'm so pleased I did it, because 9 months later I've now got a data bank of stuff that I would never have had without the pandemic. So I'm quite proud of that. So that's given me some meaning, but I haven't achieved any significant breakthroughs with sale. Well, I don't think anyone's buying, never mind, me selling anything. I don't know if that's hit you or that's how.
Yeah, well, what it certainly has. And I'm in a very, very similar boat in that respect. Work is extremely hard to come by. And you can work extremely hard to try to bring something in and then have it not happen. I mean, that's always the case with business development, but at the moment it is just it's got bells and whistles on it. And in those circumstances, it's unless you are just by nature an incredibly thick-skinned person. Unfortunately, the people who seem to be the most thick-skinned at the end of the day are probably the people who think about things least.
Yes. I think that's right.
Those of us who spend time thinking about things, and and this is what happens. That there's an article in the Sunday Times magazine about 10 days ago, a guy called Oliver Cam, who's just brought out a book. The article is really interesting. Mending the Mind.
Right. Okay.
The art and science of overcoming clinical depression.
Right. Okay.
And he's a journalist, and he had a major breakdown 7 years ago. What he's describing in there, because I've been through depression, I'm depressed at the moment. I'm clinically depressed, believe it or not. And what he talks about in there, it's painful to read. It's the most accurate description I've ever seen, and including, of course, how it feels for people who are suffering in that way, because other people don't understand, and there are no obvious symptoms much of the time, right? Because really the worst of it is when you're on your own. And I think that there's one positive thing that can come out of this in terms of mental health. It's going back to this thing about honesty, right? The mentoring group I work with, there's a lot of honesty between the mentors and the company directors and founders. And I don't know about people generally, but for me personally, going back to this need for social engagement and so on, but the fact that you recognize that others are going through the same thing. But I think it needs to go a step beyond that. I actually think that what could emerge out of this is groups of people proactively working together to support each other to get through it, and to brainstorm ideas for business. Because they're going to need to be fundamentally new, different business models coming out, and we all work best generally when we're working with other people to come up with ideas.
So sort of UK, worldwide mastermind requirement. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to talk a little bit about your own situation, your own health. But let me give a reason for that. One, you're a friend and I care about you. But the other one thing, though, that I think is quite important is I did a live show last week with Dr. Linda Shaw, and she's a neuroscientist. And we were talking about what she referred to normalisation. And what I refer to that is that there are words we use that are overused, and I said earlier, they become meaningless. And I think in many respects, mental health it's everywhere, wellness, mental health, and diversity and inclusion. It is, I mean, whether it's my bubble, but I don't think it is. It is, the other one is obviously Trump. But everything else is about those areas. I mean, it's everybody's mentally ill, everybody's depressed, everybody's stressed, and they're not. But you are. And and Dr. Shaw said to me, she said, the key thing to remember is that if we over normalize things, then we miss people who are genuinely ill.
It dilutes.
So how, if you're comfortable with it, Mark, not if you're not, obviously not, but how does it express itself? I think you'd have to be, as you say, thick-skinned. I think you'd have to be an alligator not to feel that. But so how has it expressed itself? If I could ask that question, and I appreciate that's a personal question.
No, it's absolutely. It starts from an underlying low self-esteem.
Really?
Lack of self-confidence. And I know this is true of many others as well.
Yes.
I'm not saying that this happens in every situation, but it's common, and I can track a lot of this back to childhood. I understand what were some of the factors, and there were numerous factors, and history as well of mental health challenges on both sides of the family,
Right.
which of course in those days were not recognised. I mean, we're talking, 1940s, 1950s. So I can see very clearly where these issues come from. But then you get into this sort of, and I think this is true of a lot of high achieving people. If you are reasonably good at, say, school or sport, in my case, it was school, it was academic study and results, and I was very competitive, and so that becomes the be all and the end all. And if circumstances at home are not what they should be, maybe, and you're not being dissuaded from that and put into doing other things as well to balance life out, then it becomes a bit of an obsession. And in my case, my father, who at that stage I thought that my father had downsides, but he had this phenomenal intellect, and which I felt like I couldn't match. And he'd been to Cambridge, and so my whole horizon was, I'm gonna emulate that. He didn't put me under pressure. I'm going to do that myself. So that was kind of the start of things. And then, of course, what you realize, most of us realize, is you get up that ladder, and then you find actually there are people just way, way ahead of you.
Yes.
Right? They're like in a different league.
Yeah.
So that's difficult. And your life has been very much about that. So that's where it, in a nutshell, sort of thing, where it came from. So if you fast forward that to, when for me, when I get into really high pressure situations where things are not working, then my immediate assumption is it's because of something I'm doing wrong. And then you start to beat yourself up. And if that is ingrained, it becomes very toxic. And you could literally, it's like you've gone off the edge of a cliff. And Oliver Cam, the guy in the magazine article, refers to that. And you can even be, you can be going into work and performing absolutely as normal, or turning up on Zoom calls, but behind the scenes, you are just a complete wreck. And then unfortunately what then happens is that starts to eat away at all sorts of other things. It can start to affect relationships. Obviously it can affect your performance. Being stuck at home is even worse. And you're also you're just desperate for people to understand it, which means that you tend to talk a lot about it to people who don't understand it, and it sounds very, very negative and bleak. Or some people just struggle. I mean, I struggle as somebody who's quite articulate. I struggle to find the words to explain what's going on. A lot of people can't, and they keep talking about the fact that people who are going through depression need to talk.
So we're making it worse because we're isolated.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very, very much so. And hence the reason why there's going to be a pandemic.
So thank you for sharing that. What do we do? I mean, obviously talking to each other helps, but what do we do? I mean, have you any thoughts on how we could make things better? Is it back to your support group notion that you mentioned earlier, or what do we do?
Well, I think you can do things at different levels. First of all, there are tools and techniques that are very, very well known. Cognitive behavioural therapy is generally accepted as an effective. It's scientifically proven to be effective. So, and the important thing about that is it's tackling beliefs and attitudes now, and by tackling quite mechanically behaviours and thinking.
Right. Okay.
It's painful because it's changing habits, right? So none of this is overnight. Right?
No.
So that's at one level. That's kind of a level one, as it were. There are so-called talking therapies. One of the problems is it depends on how good the therapist is and how well they get to know the client. But they can be effective. I'm working with somebody at the moment, and is quite effective. But I think ultimately what you need is actually to be coached and mentored out of it in developing some kind of purpose and direction. Because when I've had these problems in the past, that's ultimately how I've got well, is to find some new direction. And so I think if it's possible to develop, I think, support groups with advanced use of technology, which can help people learn and adapt and can open up for them what it is that they really should do, what it is that they should not do. It needs to be kind of, it's almost like, it's like you've got a broken leg. So you need a plaster cast, you need a crutch and so on and so forth. And yet what happens is you're kind of left to your own devices. So I think
Good
that,
metaphor. Yeah, I get that. Because if you don't touch it, you don't fix it, it just gets worse, doesn't it?
yes, I think there is such a body of knowledge and experience. If people are honest with one another, then they understand that these things, like I said, right at the outset, I'm encountering these issues with other people, and I'm able to support and help them because I know what they're going through, and I know what they're doing wrong. I need somebody doing that with me.
Yes. Yeah.
It's recognizing it's a real issue. It's a very, very real issue. The pandemic has greatly magnified it, and actually it's then starting to look at what are the opportunities. There's a business I know called Champion Health, based in Sheffield, set up by a 26-year-old who is amazing, and this is at the moment is being welcomed with open arms by all sorts of organizations, businesses and so on, because they all recognize the need. And basically what it's doing is providing a dashboard of the key parameters affecting mental health and performance as a result of it for organizations, but it's all completely anonymous, and it's done on a sort of a monthly basis, and then feeding into targeted interventions to stop people from getting out of control. Now that was pre-pandemic. That needs to be developed, to even more so now. I think they'll be on with it, actually, to get the technology sufficient that it works with people in, that they're capturing what's really going on with people at home.
So it's a global experiment for them, really, isn't it? It's like a worldwide test group to see how people cope under pressure. So hopefully with people doing things like that, and of course the scientific community are all over it when they're not doing COVID research, what would you like to see us moving forward into? Because we're going to have a legacy. You're right. I mean, I've no doubt you're right. Rather, I mean, I feel that I am personally worried about I think you called it a pandemic of mental health, as that is happening now, but will continue after the vaccines start to kick in. So that's going to need attention from organizations and individuals. But is there any sort of hopes you have for the future? And, because there are, no matter what anybody says, and I know it can be a noise, everybody's talking about unprecedented and pivoting and all these, and it's really trite and a lot of it's boring, but it's real. Is there anything that you would like to see happening in our organizations that would perhaps mitigate or avoid this in the future?
So I think organizations need to understand that they're wasting lots of money when people are not well,
Yeah.
or not motivated because of whatever is going on with them, whether it's to do with work or outside work. It's usually a combination of the two. So the most savvy organizations need to actually stop saying our people are our greatest asset, but actually say we need to ensure that we've got people here who are happy, stable, secure. I mean, happy's, you can't be happy all the time, but basically fundamentally they're in the right place in their own heads. That requires a support. What it actually needs is managers being trained to be much more like coaches. and and then there can be online support for that as well. You know, there can be coaching materials that people can access. So I'd like to see all of that happening, because people can't do it by themselves. And I think, what else? People have got to sort out their self-image, right? Go back to the thing about the suit of armor or whatever. In my experience, it's true with me, true with people I coach, there's a huge gulf between, you know, how they see themselves and how other people see them, and who they are not feeling able to be the person that they truly are.
Yes.
That actually needs to be addressed going forward. So people, you can't have people, how can I put it? You can't have people all doing work that has intrinsic meaning.
Yeah.
Right. That they love. Right. Yeah.
No.
This is peddled by the sort of life coaching industry and so on.
Just what was going through my head. Exactly what was going through my head.
Because we've all got to put bread on the table. We need to earn money. But if we're doing that to the exclusion of all else, and we haven't got something in our lives that's giving us true meaning, then we're going to have serious mental health problems.
Yeah. So I wonder if I think that self-help brigade, you know, fake it until you make it, and dreadful phrases like manning up and it will be hopefully, but will be the end of some of this entrepreneur bollocks, because that's all it is, all it ever was. And it's easy to say that with hindsight, and I'm not saying I haven't fallen for any of that in the past, because I think I probably have.
Me too.
Yeah, I hadn't actually thought about it that way, Mark. Thank you. That's a really interesting perspective on it, because there is this notion of, you know, going to work with the armor on, with the Jungian mask, you know, the sort of you know, projecting what you want others to see rather than what is real. And it will be interesting to see. I mean, probably we're getting towards the end now, unfortunately, but one of the things that I would like your perspective on would be, you know, this sort of tough leadership style that we still have. I mean, you still have command and control companies all over the world. Is this the beginning of the end for that? Or is it the sort of second step in the beginning of the end of that? I think it was probably going anyway, but do you think this could help us take away some of these, I guess you could say, toxic power systems that we've had in companies before? Could that be a good outcome from COVID?
Shall I give you a depressive view?
Just give me an honest view. That's how you start.
Human animals.
Yeah. The answer's no.
They will morph, right? I mean, look at, you know, Facebook came along and it was supposed to be, you know, it was to help people socialize effectively, and, you know,
and it worked at first, didn't it? Remember,
build a better world. Look what happened, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that's my kind of view on that. But I think that you know, we're part of obviously an enormous evolutionary system, and you could, you know, you can think of different, if you like, different human species that evolve in different ways, and, you know, and there are predators, and there are the weak ones that fall by the wayside, and so on and so forth, and there are those that learn to get on and succeed because they, you know, they develop effective approaches. So I think, I don't think the old command and control style is going to end. And there are some situations in which, appropriately exercised, it is necessary.
Oh yeah, definitely. No doubt.
What I also think is that another of the causes of this we haven't touched on is just the sheer overload of information that's out there, and we're all, you know, sucking in and so on. And so I think that there is an absolute need for people to simplify what they are involved in and working on, and have much more clarity about it, and whether they are leaders of organizations or anybody else. There's people just going around in circles because they're spending so much time filtering information.
Oof, Mark, you've given us a lot to think about. I wonder if people would like to be in touch with you, how would it be best for them to get in touch with you about your services or whatever else? How's the best to be in touch with you?
Well, you can email me on mark.ashton, ASHTON, at resolvegetsresults.com. It's all one word. And my mobile phone is UK 07815 881726.
Fab. Well, Mark, thank you. I feel like we could have gone on for quite a bit longer. Thank you for being candid and honest. I think the way you started this by saying that one of the things we're experiencing from the pandemic is that we're becoming more honest with ourselves. I think there's a lot in that. There's a lesson in that for me, certainly, and it's something that I think it's true of me as well, but maybe it hadn't been quite so clear. So thank you for that. I wish you well, and I hope we can have another chat sometime in the very near future.
Thank you very much. It's always good to talk to you.
Cheers.